Welcome to this explainer. Look, if you've been paying attention to the industry lately, you already know we are right in the middle of a massive, fundamental shift in cloud security. We are moving way beyond that old, tired debate about which tools to buy, and we're stepping fully into the era of the integrated operating model. I'm honestly super excited to guide you through this today because this material, it completely reorients how we need to think about securing our modern infrastructure. Let's jump in.
So, let's ground ourselves real quick. The year is 2026, and the threat landscape has, quite frankly, completely mutated. Those old arguments about how to secure the cloud, the constant back and forth about whether to just buy another shiny third-party box or stick with what the cloud provider gives you out of the box, those are officially obsolete. We're literally playing a completely different game now, and if we want to scale securely, our governance strategy absolutely has to adapt. Okay, here's our roadmap for today. Number 1, beyond native versus traditional. 2, the new center of gravity. 3, identity is the control plane. 4, AI and data realities. 5, the integrated operating model. And number 6, assessing your security maturity.
Starting off with Section 1, beyond native versus traditional, and why this debate is dead. For years, we tried, and usually failed, to force traditional security tools into the cloud. And it makes sense why it didn't work, right? Those legacy tools were built for fixed perimeters. They were designed for highly stable data centers and centralized enforcement. But the cloud? The cloud is ephemeral. Workloads spin up and vanish in a matter of seconds. Trying to port those old on-prem security patterns into the cloud usually just ended up creating massive blind spots. And let's be honest, runaway costs. That's why native cloud controls really gain dominance. They're elastic, they're highly programmable, and they are built directly into the fabric of the platform. But here's the catch. Simply choosing native controls over traditional ones, that's not the end of the story anymore.
The reality we're facing today boils down to this. Cloud security in 2026 is no longer just a tooling decision. It's an operating model decision. You can't just swipe a credit card for a new product or casually flip a switch on a native control and call it a day. We have to actually engineer security directly into the platform as an invisible, always-on governance layer. Native controls aren't just a set-it-and-forget-it checklist for audit season anymore. They are the absolute baseline foundation of a continuous living control system.
Moving on to Section 2, the new center of gravity. Enter CNAPP.
Okay, so CNAPP. That stands for Cloud Native Application Protection Platforms. Now, I know what you're thinking. Great, another industry acronym to memorize. But trust me on this one. CNAPP is the operational shift that is quite literally going to save your security team's sanity. Your engineers are exhausted. They are tired of chasing down 10 different dashboards for vulnerability scanning, container security, and identity exposures. What CNAPP does is it takes all those fragmented signals, posture, identity, workload, data, and runtime, and correlates them into one single, prioritized, highly actionable picture of your actual risk. It's the engine that finally stops alert fatigue dead in its tracks.
Because at the end of the day, context is everything. It's all about context over clutter. Sure, knowing about some minor misconfigured cloud resources is useful, but finding a publicly exposed workload that also happens to have a critical vulnerability, happens to contain highly sensitive customer data, and is operating with wildly excessive privileges, that isn't just useful. That is absolutely essential. That right there is a front-page breach waiting to happen. Shifting our focus away from duplicate findings and disconnected dashboards and towards prioritizing the interconnected risks that actually threaten the business, well, that changes everything.
Which brings us to Section 3. Identity is the control plane, the real perimeter.
We really have to update our mental model here because we aren't just talking about human users and IT admins anymore. Look at this list. We are dealing with service accounts, API keys, OAuth grants, workload identities, and now a massive one, AI agents. In 2026, your most dangerous keep-you-up-at-night risk is not a missing firewall rule. No way. It's an unmonitored identity, specifically a machine identity floating around with too much access, far too much persistence, and absolutely zero clear business owner. Identity governance has to be treated as a non-negotiable core pillar of your cloud security architecture, period.
All right, Section 4, AI and data realities, the expanded risk surface. A few years ago, our cloud security questions were actually pretty straightforward. Who has access to this? What's vulnerable? What's misconfigured? Easy enough. But the rapid rise of AI-enabled workloads has flipped the script entirely. Now, we are forced to ask massive, complex governance questions, like what AI systems are actually running in our environment right now? What sensitive data are they actively processing? Are the prompts, the outputs, and the training data being securely logged? Can an AI agent just take autonomous action in our production systems without human oversight? It's kind of wild when you think about it. This is exactly where cloud security, AI governance, and data governance are heavily overlapping today.
So, how on earth do you actually answer those massive AI-era questions? Well, you rely on DSPM, Data Security Posture Management. You see, the old cliché is true. Security teams simply cannot protect what they can't see, and executive boards certainly cannot make strategic risk decisions based on vague, hand-wavy assurances that the cloud is just inherently secure. DSPM gives us that absolutely crucial visibility. It doesn't just check a box saying data is encrypted. It tells us exactly where sensitive data lives, who is poking around in it, and, crucially, if unvetted AI systems or third-party tools are plugged directly into our crown jewels.
Let's move to Section 5, the Integrated Operating Model, putting it all together.
Consider this your master blueprint. This is how all the pieces of the puzzle fit together without overlapping and creating a ton of useless noise. Your native controls act as your foundation. They enforce policy as close to the platform as possible. Then, CNAPP sits right on top of that, taking all that data to correlate and prioritize your cloud-native risk. Now, take a look at the third row, SIEM and SOC. This is where traditional tools still heavily matter. You need them for enterprise-wide detection, long-term data retention, and forensics. But, and this is a huge but, they have to integrate seamlessly. If your traditional tools are just recreating an outdated on-prem model in the cloud and spamming you with duplicate alerts, they are actively working against you. Finally, you have your GRC platforms and identity governance wrapping around the whole thing to enforce accountability and track evidence.
When you actually get that operating model right, you unlock something amazing: continuous assurance. We all know the absolute nightmare of traditional compliance, right? Taking endless screenshots, exporting incredibly dense spreadsheets, and manually assembling evidence folders while your whole team loses sleep. Well, with this new operating model, compliance is no longer a massive manual fire drill. By utilizing automated evidence collection, continuous control monitoring, and policy as code, compliance suddenly becomes this continuous, machine-readable process that's just embedded naturally into your daily operations.
Let's synthesize this to make it crystal clear. A truly mature cloud security operating model in 2026 relies on 6 pillars. You start with a rock-solid native control foundation. You build upon that with an integrated CNAPK to give you context instead of clutter. You wrap that setup in unshakable identity governance and robust runtime threat detection. And finally, you shine a massive spotlight on it all with deep, granular visibility into your data and your AI workloads. Do all that, and the entire system naturally generates continuous assurance for you.
And finally, Section 6, Assessing Your Security Maturity. Time for some practical reflection.
I want to leave you with a challenge, something provocative to take right back to your leadership teams tomorrow. Ask them this: can our GRC team actually produce audit-ready evidence without frantically chasing down screenshots? And can we clearly identify our single highest-risk cloud attack path without a poor engineer having to manually stitch together data from 5 completely different tools? If your answer to either of those is no, then you aren't doing security yet. You're just collecting tools. It is time to step up, abandon the clutter, and build a fully integrated operating model. So the real question is, are you going to keep struggling with the noise, or are you ready to finally scale securely? Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer.